A quick thank you to the T5 peeps. Bob the Dragon, Datamagnet, Cat Crab Lobster, DuckMachine, TryAgain95, Astraya the Dreamer, Mezec, Feudic Jarl, Germanchemist, Casper Arnholtz, and Chaos to Must. Thank you very much. The Mercy of the Fae. Written by DrBlackJack21. The Mercy of the Fae. Sinowak was in a real bind. He'd always been known for his curiosity and cleverness, but this time his curiosity of his had landed him in some serious trouble. The trinket he'd found and clearly belonged to an elder fae. Knowing that, he hadn't intended to do something stupid like steal it or break it. He just meant to give it a little look-see. Now, he was trapped. Somehow fae magic had captured him and wouldn't let him go. His head was encircled by some translucent force field. It was almost invisible, but it caused just enough distortion to give him a headache. What was worse, it trapped his breath. It seemed to allow just enough air to flow that he wasn't about to suffocate, but most of the air he breathed in was the hot, sticky air he'd breathed out only moments ago. The only thing that he could smell anymore was his own breath. The real danger lay in his inability to pass food or water through the magic field. Whatever transgression Sinowak had committed, he hadn't thought it was deserving of a slow and agonizing death by thirst. But that was the way of the Fae. They were strange and cruel. They were as likely to give the gift of food as they were to condemn you to death over some minor infraction only they seemed to receive. None of Sinowak's friends or families could help. At least, they'd been curious, but as his distress became evident, they cried and pulled at the strange trinket to no avail. Through the field encompassing his head, their voices sounded twisted and distorted, making them sound like a banshee cry of the Fae. Thinking quickly, Sinowak realized that there was only one chance left. If this was the magic of the Elder Fae, then only the Fae could remove it. So, with confidence born of the realization that this was his only chance at life, Sinowak set out on a journey to find a Fae or die trying. The problem was, there was no guarantee that they would help him if they found one. When a Fae offered you food, sometimes it was given as a gift with no strings attached, but other times it was a recipient was whisked away into the night. Some never returned. Some were dropped off impossibly far from where they'd been stolen. Others were barely missed before they came back. But you could always tell the victim of the Fae when they returned. They were forever changed. There was a haunted look in their eyes that never went away completely. Sometimes they'd become obsessed with the Fae, forever looking to follow them into the magnificent halls and join in their decadent feasts. Others developed a deep fear of the Fae and would jump and cower at any unexpected noise forevermore. But Sinowak had little choice. He simply had to hope luck was on his side this night, and he'd find the one that was benevolent rather than, well, that was the best not thought about. As his long journey continued, Sinowak was getting tired and thirsty, but he dared not lay down and rest. If he gave up now, he might never awaken. As tired as he was, Sinowak felt a flare of hope when he found a trail left by the Fae. There was no mistaking one of their trails. They were lined with stones of unearthly quality. Everything about these trails looked, felt, and even smelled wrong. It was a clear message that no one not of their world was welcome there. If you absolutely had to cross the Fae trail, it was best done as quickly and as silently as possible. The Fae rode up and down the trails with wild abandon. The mounts had fierce, glowing eyes, breath that smelled of smoke and fire, and their cries sounded as if the very devil was on the hunt. If anyone was unlucky enough to find themselves in the path of one of these wild hunts, there was no mercy to be found. They were trampled to death, and their bodies were left as a warning to everyone else. as if to say, "This is Feyland, and only the Fey are welcome here." Senowek's mother had made sure to show him one such body when he was still very young. He'd never forgotten the reek of death, and the memory haunted him all the more at this moment. Senowek had no intention of crossing the path and incurring their wrath, but perhaps if he wandered close enough to it, he'd eventually stumble upon a Fey willing to help. Senowek's journey had failed him. He was past his limits and simply didn't have the strength to go on. As he lay by the side of the path and contemplated how absurd this all was, he was doomed to die for something as simple as a little innocent curiosity. It just wasn't fair. That was when Senowek noticed movement in the light reflecting through the magic. Even distorted, he could hear the voice that clearly belonged to one of the elder Fey. It lacked the sharp, crisp sounds of the normal voice, and instead rumbled and meandered as it morphed from one sound into another, with barely any hesitation. It was as if the thing striding towards him didn't need to pause for breath as it sang. Senowek was suddenly filled with terror. There was dark Fey. He knew it. It was obviously here to mock him at the end. Or maybe to make his last moments that much more agonizing. He struggled to get to his feet, but he was too heavy, thirsty, and tired. He was barely able to bat weakly the giant Fey as it grabbed a hold of him. The strength of the monster was beyond Senowek's comprehension. The amount of power behind each finger was more than Senowek had in an entire arm. All it would take was the slightest of squeezes or a quick twist, and he would be dead. As he feared, the fingers began to squeeze. But just as Senowek feared his bones would start to crack, they stopped. It was a firm grip, not at all comfortable. But Senowek could tell that the Fey was being oddly careful as it held him. Then the giant started pulling at the trinket which had him captive. As the trinket began to move, it caught on Senowek's ears. He was starting to fear that he'd be torn from his head when, with a sudden pop, the cursed thing came free. Senowek could finally hear, smell, and see more, but perhaps that was the last cruel trick of the Fey. It was free at last, but too weak to do anything other than lie down and die. Senowek would have cried if he had any water left for tears. That was when the Fey turned and rummaged through one of the mysterious packs some of them liked to carry. Senowek didn't have long to wonder what he was looking for, because soon the Fey pulled out a beautiful crystal container filled with glorious water. Then his mysterious savior took out a sheet of wood and bent it and twisted it into a bowl, which he filled with the water from the crystal vial. Senowek hesitated a moment, remembering the tales of those whisked away by the Fey for the sin of accepting an offered gift. But he was in no position to reject that which was before him. He took a careful sip. This was the purest, most wonderful water that he had had in his life. Slowly at first, then with increasing eagerness, Senowek drank his fill, though he kept a close eye on the Fey as he did so. He only stopped when his benefactor flashed its teeth in warning. Perhaps he'd gone too far and pushed the patience of the great being. Best not to hang around and find out. With the energy born from a second chance at life, Senowek rose to his feet and retreated back away from the dreaded path. He was expecting to be grabbed any moment, but made it to the tree line without the Fey moving from his spot. Senowek looked back at his savior. He was more grateful than he could express, but all he could do was bark out his gentle gratitude before retreating back into the forest. Eric watched the poor little fox retreat in the tree line. He'd come across the little thing with its head stuck in a bottle. It had been too tired to escape, so he'd taken a chance to pull the bottle off and free the little guy. Even then, the fox didn't get up and run away like it should have. With the sinking feeling, Eric rummaged through his backpack, looking for his half-drunken plastic water bottle. Not having a cap, he folded a sheet of paper into a makeshift bowl and filled it with water. When the fox first began to drink, Eric noted how weak he seemed. But eventually, the little animal seemed to regain his strength, and it brought a smile to his face. Right then, the fox started away. While Eric was sad to see him go so soon, he was happy to see it feeling so much better. Once it got to the tree line, the fox looked back and let out the cutest little yip before disappearing. As Eric cleaned the mess and continued walking home from school, he did so with pride, knowing he made the world a little better for at least one little creature. End of story. And that, my friends, concludes this video. I hope that you enjoyed.